Hey friends, welcome to my channel. Let's get started.
These are these Dollar Tree mirrors. They had them out a little while ago. I had bought them in white originally, tried to paint them black to make some hexagon shelves, and the paint didn't stick, long story short. So I ended up going back, buying the black ones, and I made these hexagon shelves, which I absolutely love. But I still had these ones left over that were all chippy, messed up, didn't know what to do with, just sitting around. So I sanded off all the black paint, and these are the original color. They were white. So we're gonna attempt something different. I think my problem was I should have sanded down the plastic first to get it to stick. I literally did nothing, just went right in with paint. So now the surface is all roughed up. I sanded it down, sanded all that paint off, and we're gonna try to paint these again and do something different with them.
So first I'm gonna take this deep navy blue homemade paint that I have and paint both of my frames. So I made this paint color mixing True Navy by Apple Barrel and Ink by Waverly. And then I want to cover up this back side because it's open and I want it to be a solid frame. Taking some foam core board, I'm just going to trace both the inside and outside of my foam board and then cut this out using my X-Acto knife. So when you're cutting foam core board, you want to have a very sharp knife. I put a brand new blade in my X-Acto knife so that I would get a nice clean line and not a jaggedy line. Once I have everything cut out, I just pop it out and hot glue it to the back of my frame using my Surebonder detail tip glue gun, so I didn't have a ton of hot glue seeping out the ends. And I also used the Gorilla hot glue sticks. Then I just painted everything, the foam core and the sides, all with that same deep navy color. I also just trimmed off any of the foam core that was hanging over the edge of the frame. Next, I'm taking this reed that I got from Amazon, and I will link it below. I don't know what I did to it, but I set it down and came back and it was a hot mess and unraveled. But anyways, I'm gonna just glue this down all the way around my frame, and this is also going to help conceal the seam of where we added that foam core board. So using my E6000 and hot glue, I'm going to attach my little reed pieces. Now you do not want to mix these two glues. You will deactivate the longevity of your E6000 and it will not hold up over time. I see a lot of people do that mistake of just putting both of them down together. Do not mix them, people. You do not want to do that. But I also decided to cut these down because I wanted those sharp points all around my hexagon rather than one continuous strip that wasn't going to lay as flat as I wanted it to. Once I had all of my reed glued down, I just took both of my hexagon frames and I slid them together so that they formed like this little, I don't even know what kind of shape you would call this, but so that they sat nicely together. I did not glue these in place. You certainly could if you wanted a more secure hold, but they fit together pretty snug. So then I'm taking this circle wood round that I got from Walmart, and again, I'm painting this with my navy blue paint. So I don't show this part because I had to go back in afterwards and add it, but I took a Jenga tumbling tower block that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and I also painted that navy because I needed something more to hold my terracotta pot up. This just wasn't glued down to the surface quite enough to hold my pot. So you'll see what I mean here in just a minute. But then I'm going to glue my circle down to the bottom of my hexagon shelves, and there was a gap underneath of it. You can't really tell here, but I did need to put that Jenga block under the circle and onto the frame so that it would have like some more support and hold up my pot and be a little bit more secure. Then I just took some 4mm macrame cord, and I'm gonna use this for my hanger part. Now, I don't know if I love this. I think I might go back and either add in a chain or some jute or something else that's just a little more cohesive with this look. but this was what I used for now. Then I'm just going to take a very generous amount of my Gorilla hot glue, put it on my wood round, and then glue a medium-sized terracotta pot from the Dollar Tree right down to the center. After that's dry, I'm gonna take these florals that I got from Hobby Lobby, and if anyone knows what these are called, let me know in the description box. There was no name on the tag or in the location I picked these up from Hobby Lobby, so I do not know what they are called, but they are beautiful. And here is how it turned out. For this next project, I'm taking this glass gallon jug that I got from the Goodwill several months ago, and I made it over in another DIY video a little while back. So I'll link that in the description box below, but I'm going to start out by removing all of the embellishments that I previously added to it. So then I'm taking these scraps that I had left over from a carpet rug gripper mat that I just put a new rug in my bedroom, and these were literally just the scraps left over that I cut off from where they were hanging out from the rug. And I'm going to place these in various spots all around my glass jar. So some of them I cut down thinner to be just like single strips, and I just started attaching these all over the jar wherever I thought it looked nice, and I used my E6000 to hold this in place. So I glued these all down in place on a Friday evening, came back to it Saturday morning, and it was good to go. So I didn't give it like a full 24 hours to dry, but it did have several hours. So there is no rhyme or reason to where I glued these pieces down, just wherever I thought it looked nice and just created a unique pattern. And here is how it's looking with all of my rug gripper pad pieces all over the jar. So next I'm taking my ivory chalk paint and some baking soda mixture. Now I know everyone and their mother is doing this technique, but stick with me because this is not what we end up doing. So I do this part at first. I mix up my paint and baking soda and I start stippling it all over my jar. So I want that texture, and I want a lot of texture. So that's why I'm stippling this, even though if you were to just paint this on regularly, you will still get that texture from the baking soda. But here you can see, I know this is the first coat of paint. I do end up doing 2, but still wasn't happy with how the rug pieces were still looking like they were not part of the jar. And that's what I was going for. I wanted that cohesive look, like it was always meant to be there, and that's just how the jar was, or the vase, or whatever you want to call this thing. The vessel, I don't know. So next I'm taking some lightweight spackle from the Dollar Tree, and I mixed that with my paint. And here I'm just spreading it over the raised edges, and I'm kind of feathering it down, and then taking my brush again and stippling over all of that to kind of blend it in. And this gave a much better effect and made those rug gripper pieces look like they were part of this vase. And that is what I was going for. So I did have to let this dry for quite a while because it was really thick on there, but here is how it's looking, and you absolutely could leave it just like this. I think it is simply beautiful and very modern boho, you know, whatever look you're going for. But I wanted to take it a step further and make it look aged. So I took various shades of browns that I had in my stash, and I will link all of the colors on the screen here so you know what I used. But I just took some chippy brushes, some sponge dabbers, went all over this vase in various spots because I really wanted those raised pieces to stick out the most, but I still wanted this piece to look like it was aged. However, I also wanted it to be light. So I still wanted it to be like a fairly white piece. So after I went in with all of my shades of browns, and I did throw in a little gray in there, then I took my ivory again and went over the entire piece to blend it all together. And I did this several times, back and forth with my browns, finish it off with my white until I was happy with the look. And I think this turned out not exactly how I had envisioned, but I still love that aged effect that I got. And this is how it turned out. For this last project, I'm taking these little arch windows you can find at the Target dollar spot, and I'm going to remove this plastic backing from it. Now, I found these a few months ago around the holidays, but I have heard that Target has these out at several times throughout the year, so be on the lookout for these next time you see them. And then I'm also taking one of these little square puzzles that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and I'm just gluing all of the shapes in place. Now, you don't need to glue these shapes in place if that doesn't bother you. It would still sit level and flush with the ground once you flip it over, but I decided to glue them in place anyways. And then I'm taking my antique Waverly wax and I'm going to paint all 3 of these pieces, front, back, all the nooks and crannies, make sure it's all good and covered. Next, I'm going to take my wood glue and I'm going to start gluing these pieces together. You're going to see me struggle here for a second. This was a little difficult to glue together. This was a Pinterest-inspired frame planter, and I will show a picture of that in just a minute here, but I needed to get these pieces clamped together in a specific way, which is what made it difficult until the glue kind of started to set and actually hold this piece in place. But we got it figured out and it worked out in the end. So for the top, I decided to use my E6000. I thought this was going to dry clear and then I could paint over it being shiny and dull that down with my Waverly wax, where the wood glue would not have dried as clear and would have been a lot more noticeable. So to hold these together to form that pyramid triangle shape, I took another very tiny clamp, not one of these, that clearly didn't work, but I took another tiny clamp that I got from Harbor Freight. I love these things. They were like 70 cents, but they are great for DIY projects. And I let this dry overnight. Next, I took a square dowel that came in a variety pack from Walmart and cut it down with my miter shears. And I cut this down at a 75-degree angle on both sides so that it would fit up in that center to be our little brace. Then I'm going to find the center of my little dowel here, and I'm going to take this little hook and screw it down in place. I got this hook in a picture hanging kit that you can find at the Dollar Tree. It was a shiny gold, but I just spray painted it with some antique bronze to dull that down and match our project a little bit better. Then I'm going to take my E6000 once again and glue this brace in place and let that set up for a little while. That rhymed. While that's drying, I'm moving on to my pot. So I'm taking one of these mini terracotta pots you can find at the Dollar Tree. They come in the 3-pack and it's the smallest size they have. And then I'm taking 2mm macrame cord I got on Amazon. I'll link it below. And I cut this down into 6 2-foot long strands. And I'm going to shove each one of those strands into the hole at the bottom of my terracotta pot and then tie a knot on the inside to hold everything together. Next, I'm going to divide my strands into 3 groups of 2. And all we're going to do here is tie some knots, nice and easy, nothing complicated. So I'm going to tie 3 knots for each of my strand groups right at the bottom of my pot. Then I'm going to take 1 strand from each of my knots and bring them over together and tie another row of knots. And I know that part is always complicated to explain, but you can see here exactly what I'm doing. Once I have all 3 of those knots in place, I'm going to do this one more time, separating out 1 strand from each knot and then tying a new knot. And that's it for the number of knots I'm going to have. So I had, I think, 3, yeah, 3 rows on this pot. So once I had all of my knots in place, I'm gonna hang it from this little hook that we put in the top of our pyramid. So I started stringing them through the little hook one strand at a time, and there might have been an easier way to do this. I thought about maybe I could have strung all of these on before gluing it in place and maybe like set my planter on something to raise it up so it wouldn't be too heavy for the glue to set. I don't know, but this was like a really tiny project, so it was a little more complicated. But before I secure this terracotta pot in place, I'm gonna make sure that it is level. I love this tiny little level that I have. It is great for DIYs. So once I have that where I want it to be, I'm gonna start wrapping the top of my macrame cords to make it look finished. And I'm not gonna go into too much detail in this video because this is so tiny and you can hardly see what I'm doing to begin with, but I do have a full in-depth tutorial on my channel about how to create one of these macrame wraps for the top of a hanging planter. So I'm wrapping an additional strand of macrame cord all the way around the top, and then I have a loop that you can kind of see there that's just sticking out, and that is where I end up looping my string that I am wrapping with through, and then it creates my knot and conceals it and makes this look like a very clean wrap. But like I said, it is difficult to see with how tiny this project is. So now that I have that in place, I'm going to take my level one more time and make sure this thing is how I want it to sit. And I love that this came out level on the first try. I don't think I would have changed it if it wasn't, but it ended up being perfect. So the last thing I'm going to do is take this lavender pick that I got from Walmart, and I'm just going to take some various pieces and stick them in my terracotta pot. At first I was going to add some floral foam, but I decided I didn't need it and it looked better without it. So here's a look at how this one turned out. That's it for this video today, guys. Let me know which one of these 3 boho style projects was your favorite, and I'll see you in the next one.